The Earth is dying. Scientists look for a new planet able to sustain human life and find it in the year 2063. The planet is seen on screen while a woman explains that it is a planet humans can colonize. She continues, saying that a scouting mission to the planet should be sent. Since the voyage there will take 86 years. The crew of the mission will reproduce on the ship, making the third generation on board the one to reach the planet. The crew is genetically engineered on Earth by combining the genes of leading scientists. A man, Richard, is seen talking about the reasoning behind this plan, justifying why the crew will be specifically engineered to man the mission, consisting of children raised and trained solely for its purpose. The next step is assessing when they'll be ready to go. The younger the crew is, the longer the resources can be preserved. But Richard is concerned that they might not be fully equipped to deal with the complexity of space travel on their own. Later, Richard enters a facility where the child crew is being raised, and he gets into full protective gear. He enters the rooms where they live, and when they see him, they all rejoice. Richard monitors their progress in education, and then tucks Christopher, Stella, and Zach into bed. Zach tells him that he's afraid, but Richard comforts him by telling him that he's safe. The next day, Richard discusses with a woman in charge of the mission, expressing his desire to go with the children to raise and protect them. Richard's addition to the mission would also mean that it will be able to launch in 4 years instead of 7. Next, the mission launches with Richard at the helm. The shuttle docks with Humanitas, the ship for the mission. They all go inside and find their quarters. Richard takes one last look at Earth. 10 years later, the children have grown into adults, and they can be seen waking up and getting ready to start their days on the ship. The first lesson covers the fertilization for the second generation, which will begin in the 24th year of their lives. The crew goes about their day with a sense of routine. They're seen consuming a blue liquid. Christopher and Zach are listening to classical music. Stella walks through the ship and gazes out at the space around them. Later, she talks to Richard, expressing her belief that the lives of the crew are unimportant. Trying to comfort her, he shows her pictures of his grandparents, emphasizing the importance of providing for the future. That night, Christopher struggles to sleep and listens to the sounds of the ship. The next day, Richard and Christopher are in the hydroponics bay, checking the state of the plants when a message about toxicity in the water appears on Christopher's screen. He asks Richard about it, suspecting that it's caused by some chemical that isn't being processed from their urine. But Richard dismisses his concerns, exhibiting skepticism. Later, Christopher asks Zach about the ingredient T56J, and they wonder why the information is unavailable. During the night, the two of them decide to investigate further. Christopher bypasses the firewall and manages to find the information. They discover that the chemical ingredient is present in the blue liquid they drink. Zach initially assumes it was a digestion aid, but they soon realize that it has other effects on their personality. They're being drugged and pacified, so they don't reproduce naturally and overpopulate the ship. Christopher and Zach decide to stop drinking the blue liquid. Later, they share the information with Kai and Julie, along with the details about a hidden compartment on the ship. In a session with Richard, Christopher confronts him about the lies and mentions the unmarked compartment, Pod 23. Richard explains that the mission must have kept secrets for a reason, suggesting that the pod might be for the third generation. After the session, Richard sends a message back to Earth, requesting permission to share everything with the crew and be honest with them to maintain their trust. The message will take time to reach Earth. The next day, while standing in line next to Stella, Christopher has a daydream about her. During lunch, he keeps stealing glances at her, but Zach interrupts by telling her that she has changed. Richard intervenes and reprimands Zach for breaking the rules. In the gym, Christopher and Zach engage in a heated fight, pushing the boundaries. The rest of the crew doesn't understand what's happening. Christopher and Zach start experiencing the effects of not taking the drug. They hear strange noises from the ship and decide to go to an observation room where they encounter another crew member. The three of them speculate that it might be an alien life form. In Richard's office, he shows Stella dried plants from Earth. Christopher and Zach overhear their conversation and approach the room. Zach becomes jealous when he sees Richard touching Stella's shoulder. They lose contact with Earth, and Richard informs them that the transmitter needs to be repaired. Zach volunteers to accompany him while the others continue with their assigned tasks. The preparations for the spacewalk progress, and Zach encounters Stella again. He behaves inappropriately towards her, prompting Richard to intervene and ask Zach what is happening. Zach runs away. While searching for Zach, Richard encounters Fabre, who informs him that Zack has stopped taking the blue liquid. Shortly after, Richard finds Christopher and discovers that he has also stopped taking the drug. They argue, but Richard explains that the drug was implemented to prevent the kind of behavior exhibited by Zack. Richard asks Christopher for help in fixing the transmitter so that when it's operational, they can voice their objections to mission control. The rest of the crew remains in their positions on the ship while preparations for the spacewalk continue. Zack enters the systems room and Richard and Christopher venture outside the ship. Christopher experiences new sensations, and Richard keeps a close eye on him. Richard successfully repairs one of the transmitter parts and proceeds to work on the second one. Inside the ship, the strange noises resurface, and the crew grows restless. They check the surroundings for any anomalies, and suddenly something appears on the screen next to Richard and Christopher. It injures Richard, throwing him away from the ship. The ship experiences malfunctions as well. The crew is bewildered by what has occurred. A fire breaks out in the systems room, and Christopher brings Richard inside the ship, rushing him to the medical area. Various errors arise across the ship, affecting navigation and communication. The medical team and Sella attempt to resuscitate Richard, but their efforts prove unsuccessful. Sella, the chief medical officer, pronounces Richard dead. Later, during a crew meeting, they discuss the events and mention the creaking sound they heard. One crew member reveals that they saw something on the monitor, resembling an alien force entering Richard's body. Fibre breaks down in tears. Christopher consoles the crew, assuring them that if they stay united, they will be all right. The ship's systems reboot, and the crew begins checking the surveillance archive, only to discover that all the footage was deleted in the fire. They decide to elect a new chief officer. Zack asserts his claim, but the crew insists on holding an election. After the votes are cast, Christopher is chosen as the new chief officer. Although Zack feels jealous, he congratulates Christopher nonetheless. Their first task is to repair the damaged transmitter, and Christopher assigns the entire crew to work on the other repairs caused by the fire. Fixing the surveillance system becomes a priority so they can investigate Richard's fate, hoping the drives are intact. Sawa goes to Richard's office and starts going through his pictures and videos. When Christopher arrives at the door, Sawa reveals that she is supposed to delete his personal archive, even though she doesn't want to do it. She shows Christopher Richard's photographs, and they discuss the significance of parental connections. Christopher questions why Richard confided in Sawa about his life, wondering if they were more than just friends. However, Sawa clarifies that Richard was simply feeling alone. They proceed to watch Richard's video diary, where he expresses his unwavering belief in the mission and his deep care for the crew. Christopher searches for the crew and finds them in the cantina, upset that they are not at their posts. Zack explains that they are repairing the refrigerators to prevent food spoilage. Despite the urgency, there is a surplus of food, so Zack proposes having a feast to celebrate Christopher becoming the new chief officer. After the feast, Ty advises the crew not to consume the blue liquid, and they collectively dispose of it. Sella and Christopher continue watching Richard's videos, finding joy and laughter in the memories. Christopher begins developing stronger feelings for Sella, while Zack finds himself attracted to Julie. They touch each other, catching the attention of the rest of the crew. Later, the crew can be seen engaging in playful fights and running around the ship, enjoying themselves. They explore Richard's personal archive together. Sella discovers them in Richard's quarters and insists they leave, but they refuse. Zack, the last to exit, warns Sella that Richard is no longer there to protect her. Sella returns to the medbay and retrieves a scalpel. Meanwhile, Christopher follows Zack, concerned that he might harm Stella. When Christopher realizes Stella is in the medbay, he arrives before Zack can and tries to explain his intentions. Zack leaves when Christopher pretends that they are engaging in intimate activities. Stella, initially threatened by Christopher's presence, eventually understands that he wants to assist her. She implores him to help the rest of the crew since they are spiraling out of control. Christopher departs and encounters Zack along the way, warning him to stay away from Sella. As they continue their conversation, they hear the strange crackling noise once more. Christopher follows the sound around the ship, and other crew members can also hear it. Kai witnesses Julie becoming close to another crewman and flies into a rage, assaulting him. They engage in a physical altercation. In the cantina later, Christopher attempts to restore order among the crew, but they reject his efforts. Suddenly, the crewman whom Kai had fought earlier retaliates by attacking Kai with a tool. Christopher intervenes by striking the crewman to stop the assault. He then instructs everyone to get Kai and the other crewmen treated for their injuries and convene in the common room. During the meeting, Christopher emphasizes the need for an end to the fighting and the continuation of repairs. Zack challenges Christopher's leadership, and others begin to question the purpose of their work, believing they won't reach the end of the mission. Christopher asserts that their future generations will fulfill the mission and emphasizes the importance of supporting them. A crew member expresses reluctance to work in the system's room, claiming that the alien resides there and blaming Christopher for bringing it on board after Richard's death. Phoebe suggests repairing the surveillance system to investigate what happened, but Zack dismisses her and tells Christopher to be silent. Zack no longer cares about following the rules and attempts to rally others to join his faction, suggesting that he should be the leader. He tries to convince the crew to align with his group, promising strength in combating the alien if it indeed exists. To Christopher's dismay, many crew members start to follow Zack's lead. Using the fear of aliens, Zack ignites a revolt and infuriates the crew members to stand against it. After the death of Richard, they are no longer bound to follow the rules, and they are now on their own. While others join Zack's vile motives, Christopher and Sela could foresee the destruction. Through surveillance footage, Christopher finds out that it was Zack who killed Richard by increasing the electric flow during his outer space assessment. In order to stop Zack and his team of bandits, Christopher opens a hidden pod where the management hid weapons for the third generation. But before Christopher can put his hands on them, Zack intervenes and takes over. Now, with weapons in their hand and violence on their minds, Zack's minions are uncontrollable. Richard's daughter Sela and Christopher are their targets. While running away, they both enter a discharge pod and open the hatch to outer space. Zack, unaware of it, enters the pod following them and is stunned. He puts up a fight, but Sela and Christopher throw him out in outer space. With Zack gone, the revolution subsides, bringing peace and harmony on board. Sela, the new captain of the ship, leads the mission. They follow the rules set by her father Richard and management, but stop taking the blue liquid, feeling they are capable of controlling their demons by themselves. A final montage pictures New Earth with the multi-generation on the ship, ready to land.